Hey there, and welcome back to another My Hero Academia Season 8 video. And today we're going to be talking about the latest episode to drop, Episode 3, Final Boss, which is going to pick up where we left off with Bakugou being revived and staring down All for One. This season has started off strong and seemingly shows no sign of slowing down at all. This episode was the best yet in my eyes, and so let's not waste time now. However, before we go any further, I would like to say that I have read the manga in the past, but by this point, it's become extremely hazy. So I'm just flying blind. The last confirmed things I really knew were the Bakugou awakening and then the very final post-credit style stuff to wrap up the story. Everything bridging those moments though is unknown, although it could come back to me, you never know. So spoiler warning just in case. Now onto the episode. We start off with the cold open where Deku freaks out that All Might's about to die, whilst around the world everybody's having that exact same thought. Those that know him are in tears watching the footage, just like we saw last episode, before Bakugou very dramatically wakes up. We get the intro theme, and when we return, it's to see All Might getting very slowly killed by All for One. This is one of those definitive cases of anime timescale. The reality is that there's no chance that All for One wouldn't have killed him by now, yet everybody gets to sit and watch as he slowly pulls him in half or whatever his plan is. We then get a little bit of perspective on how the rest of the world views this fight, and to be honest, it felt very true to life. You have some people like the farmer who seems engrossed in the moment, but are easily able to move on with their lives. There's some, like the dude in his bedroom all alone in the dark, that seemed almost resigned to the death of All Might. The newsroom callously brushes it off as a faraway crisis that has no relevance and that meeting their deadlines are more important. Then there are those that whilst they're far away, still have this connection to All Might and are sad that he's gonna die. That guy, Martin, quietly muttering that he doesn't want All Might to die. It's sort of like when a big name actor I like dies. I often find myself saying, oh man, I don't want them to be dead. It shakes you up a bit. They show people praying and that one guy screaming at the TV. That would be me if this was real. And I really liked this wide array of responses. It was very relatable and just sort of ups the realism. Especially when you get that bucket of cold water on you about how this is viewed as something far away and rather obscure. It's mimicking how the news cycle often just ignores massive events and atrocities. Then again, this is next level. If Japan entered into a violent civil war in real life, you'd better believe there'd be a significant amount of international press coverage. So I guess in that way, the apathy towards all of this is a bit surprising. Here though is where the episode and the season kick into yet another gear. Deku and Bakugou lock eyes and without even saying anything, they know what's up. They know what they need to do. Without talking at all, they just move. With Bakugou blasting his way down to Deku, whilst Deku uses Black Whip to swing Shigaraki out of the way. Yeah, so here's where the animation and the visual design just goes nuts. It looks so absurdly good to me. Kudo talks to Deku from inside his mind, telling him that he can't use Gear Shift until he's found his pathway to victory, because otherwise, he has to face down the recoil. Of course, Deku doesn't listen and throws Bakugou using Gear Shift anyway to max out his speed. I will say it's always a little bit frustrating when My Hero gives these sorts of arbitrary limits because they never stick to them. Last season, I swear that Kudo told him on the island that once he uses Gear Shift, he's on a time limit. Apparently not though, because now Kudo's saying that if he uses it here to help save All Might, his body is going to lock up from the recoil. But we know that that's not true because later on in the episode, they briefly talk about this happening again. It's like when Deku used to break his arms and doctors would say, oh no, don't do that. The next time it could be permanent, until at one point they just did away with it all and brushed it off. I can't quite remember what the excuse was, to tell you the truth. It was something along the lines of One for All strengthening his body overall or something like that. Shigaraki of course laughs and mocks Deku for throwing Bakugou since he assumes that there's no chance in hell that Bakugou is going to be fast enough to get there in time. He tells Deku that this is the reason that All Might's becoming more solid within his mind. He's almost dead, and so his essence will fully transfer, or something like that. And how the hell does he even know this? Can he see into Deku's mind or something with a quirk? What's going on? Interestingly, Deku doesn't really say anything to this. They've kept him really quiet across these first 3 episodes so far. I guess he'll probably have a lot to say later on, but it's just a bit of a surprise. He's usually quite a chatterbox and has a lot of internal monologue going on. But we've had Shigaraki taunting him quite a bit in both this episode and the previous one, and he's just giving nothing back. The animation and the music continue to go extremely hard as Bakugou rockets towards All for One and everybody watches and waits in suspense. By this point, it was clear that Bakugou would save All Might simply because it would be ridiculous to have him come back for the save and straight up fail. Here is where we finally see that Bakugou's gotten to the same level as Deku. Not necessarily in terms of raw power, but in terms of heroic heart and spirit. We see a flashback of Night Eye dying in the hospital and talking about how he always thought that he'd be completely unable to change All Might's fate. However, Midoriya showed that you can defy destiny if you have a heroic spirit with no room for doubt and the hope and belief of people who long for a better future. Bakugou then charges in, whilst we see everybody watching and cheering, hoping that All Might can be saved. God damn, this is such a good moment. Perfect animation and emotion and music. Who's chopping onions out here? Then Bakugou finally has his moment where he can redeem himself in his own eyes from being the reason that All Might used up the last of his strength to save him from All for One. Perfect writing and caps off a legendary arc. Also, once again, I know I'm going on and on about it, but the visuals are just next level. Bakugou wasn't playing around either. He blasts him so hard it rips off All for One's hands. I never really thought about how Bakugou probably has to hold himself back quite a lot when he attacks people. His explosions are so strong that they allow him to fly, and yet when he usually blasts people, they suffer minor burns and sometimes get KO'd. So even with his clear rage issues and violent temperament, he isn't completely callous and stupid either. He knows how to pull back. All Might's vestige goes full ghost mode again, and Deku and Kudo are shaken up. I'm also really enjoying Kudo's story arc across his time in the narrative, going from not wanting to acknowledge Deku and thinking he's a weakling for wanting to save Shigaraki, to doubting him being able to use his quirk, to then becoming his main tactical advisor who still low-key doubts him from time to time. But now I think that seeing that they've yet again overcome the impossible odds, he's gonna start believing in Deku's choices and decisions. At least, I hope so. All Might passes out mid-flight it seems and starts to hallucinate again, with his version of Night Eye in his mind telling him that whilst his dream has ended, and his heroic path is over with, that not every mentor needs to die horribly. That's something for the comic books, but he made a promise to keep on living and he has to keep it. So this was very clearly shutting the door on All Might dying, wasn't it? I think it would be a bit silly to have his death as this huge plot point, see Bakugou swoop in and save him, and then kill him off. So no All Might death, which I actually really like. The mentor's death to inspire the hero is beyond cliche at this point. I think it's actually more interesting to go in a different direction. The people watching along on TV begin to cheer and celebrate when Bakugou saves All Might, before the two land a distance away and Bakugou begins to cough up blood. Also, we finally got to see All Might's eyes properly. The weight of the world has lifted from him at long last. No more eyeshadows. There's somebody else to carry the burdens now. 2 of them. At least that's how I interpreted things. Edgeshot then appears and reveals how Bakugou is alive. He stitched him up and began to pump his lungs and heart to try to bring him back and to prevent brain damage from lack of oxygen. Manually pumping his heart led to some of the nitroglycerin that Bakugou produces making its way to the heart after having slipped inside the wound earlier, and this leads to an intense bout of defibrillation. However, just because he's alive doesn't mean he's a-okay, and Edgeshot reveals that he's probably in extreme and excruciating pain. Bakugou then showcases how much he's changed by genuinely thanking him and showing him respect before All Might calls him over. Here we sort of get an echo of the "You Can Become a Hero" scene from Season 1, where All Might holds out his hand to Deku to take him on as his successor. All Might realizes that by this point, he is Bakugou's idol. He can't give him a quirk, but he can give him his Hercules gauntlet to help serve as a splint for his arm. He then shows him great respect by calling him by his full hero name, and Bakugou smiles like he's won the lottery. The Bakugou secret fanboy arc has been really fun, and this is the culmination of all of that, and it was really cute. Meanwhile, All For One's in the midst of crashing out, which I found very funny. He played himself. He's allowed the Shigaraki hatred to mess with his mind and lure him into a protracted fight with All Might when he was so close to his goal, which massively reduced his time limit. No matter what he did, All Might just refused to die, and he had answers to all his attacks. When he arrived within range, Shigaraki refused to warp him, and so All For One realized he needed to lure Deku away to give himself time to force the merge with Shigaraki. So he grabs All Might for that execution, but Bakugou intervenes and snatches him away, damaging him yet again. And now he has to go and try to force the issue with no lure. I think my favourite part of this is that All For One is your classic cerebral villain. The dude's plans have plans, and yet when all of them fail against the odds, it throws him off. He can't comprehend why things aren't working, and he rages and blames anybody and everybody, including the copy of his own consciousness that failed to subdue Shigaraki. Anybody except himself, of course. He can't have been wrong. His plan was foolproof. It's all just dumb luck. Seeing the veins on his head get bigger and bigger as he gets more and more furious as he sees was so good. In a truly epic moment, Bakugou catches up to him and screams that he's the final boss, whilst All For One has a PTSD flashback about Kudo and seemingly gets more and more furious as a result. Seriously, look how big his eyes are getting here. It's insane. I'm really keen to see why he hates this specific guy so much. From what we've seen of his interactions with Nana and All Might, he loved toying with them, but that was about it. It was all a game, he was certain he'd eventually win, but here, there's something more beyond generic malice. It's frothing hatred. The dude's faith started to morph into a titan. Then Bakugou unleashes an explosion so strong, it sends cars into the street flying before we have a brief check-in with the other battle zones, probably to try to wrap them up for good so the story can solely hone in on these two big fights. The hospital riot's wound down by this point, as is the fight on Okuto Island. Ayama and Hagakure are still clearing up the flowers, whilst in the stadium, there's currently a battle ongoing with some really creepy looking villain, but of course, we're not going to see any more of that fight because it's being fought by extreme minor 1A characters, and we are well and truly in the endgame of the story now. It's a massive shame though, because it looks like fun. The evacuation's all settled, as is the Jakku hospital, while Skeptic is in custody. However, whilst that seems to be a lot of success, at the same time, Kurogiri is still out there, whilst Aizawa and Present Mike are now missing. So clearly they're still going to come into the battle in a big way at some point. I feel like Aizawa's always such a versatile character for these types of situations, although he's so broken down now. Were they going to break him even more before it's all said and done? We briefly check in with Lady Nagant, but I figure this was just a transition back to the battle to show the explosion from her point of view, because I doubt she's going to be able to return to the story for another fight, right? That last attack on Shigaraki almost completely killed her. I don't think she could survive another. Hell, it was already a bit goofy that she managed to survive All For One's self-destruct quirk that he planted in her to begin with. Then it's over to Edgeshot, where he serves as a vehicle for some exposition. After all, some people might be watching this and questioning how the hell Bakugou's going so fast and kicking such ass. Let's not forget that Shigaraki wrecked him in their fight, so what gives? Well, we did see him begin to ascend in that battle. He'd started figuring out the next phase of his quirk. He didn't have the time to properly learn it, so he got killed, but now he's back, and he's had time to think about it. And I do like this. I always enjoy an explanation behind a power-up because it makes it feel less like an ass pull. Then it's over to Deku and Shigaraki, where Shigaraki continues his shit-talking, comparing Bakugou to a cockroach who refuses to die, whilst Deku remains silent and is somewhat stuck. He's been able to avoid getting killed by relying heavily on Danger Sense and Black Whip, but it can't last forever. He's slowly tiring out, while Shigaraki is an endless source of stamina and strength. Thus, Deku needs some way to deal with him physically, but he can't. Getting up close is suicide, and Shigaraki can also instantly regenerate. He really is up against it. On top of that, he can't use Gear Shift anymore, because if he does, that's it. As soon as he stops moving, he's going to be finished, and Shigaraki will be able to get back up. Damn, I'm actually coming up short as to how he's going to win here. Clearly he will, simply because they're not going to end the show with Japan being crushed, but it's all just vanished from my mind, to tell you the truth. Hopefully it's not too ridiculous. Then it's back over to All For One versus Bakugou, where All For One is desperately trying to get away to find Shigaraki again. He knows he's running out of time and is clearly panicking, whilst also ranting to himself about how Bakugou's weak and insignificant. A complete small fry who isn't on the same level as the others in this battle. Of course, this is just the demented ramblings of a man who is seeing it all slip through his fingers, because it's pretty clear that Bakugou is on that level now and has really gotten inside his head, hence why he's so angry and talking about him constantly. More epic animation, music and voice acting follow as Bakugou figures out the secret of how to go beyond and increase his speed to the point that not only can he keep pace with All For One, but he can go so fast that he catches up to him even after a significant head start and stops him getting to the battle. Just a truly amazing scene here. Rather hilariously, Bakugou catches up and realizes that he's going too fast, and he laughs as he full-on crashes through buildings whilst taunting All For One. What are the buildings made of in this world where characters without super strength can just easily survive being tossed through them? Here we then get the confirmation that Bakugou thinks that he could actually be at the point where he could surpass Deku, which I think is a firm reality. They wouldn't call back to him wondering if he can catch up and then follow up with this line if it wasn't true. After all, Deku and All Might are strong, yes, and Deku has those good quirks, but speed is always the most important thing. Being strong and fast. And if Bakugou can go this fast, then he's probably able to dodge whatever they dish out. Plus, we know that they're not super endurance types either. Deku and All Might can be badly hurt. This would actually be a very interesting discussion. Also, is Bakugou just the strongest person who wasn't bred or altered in some way? Maybe a tie between him and Star and Stripe, who only died to plot BS and had a busted quirk? We then check in with Bakugou's parents, with the dad too upset to look at the screen because he's afraid Bakugou is going to die against All For One, whilst the mum keeps looking because she feels like she has to, because he's fighting and he's smiling for all of them, very All Might. Maybe he's a bit more of a wild version of him, but you can see that he's a true successor in spirit, if not in name like Deku is. Back to All For One, he's now shitting his pants. Bakugou's on his ass and looking freaky, making him afraid like he hasn't felt in years, even worse than All Might made him feel. He then flashes to his memory of killing Kudo and how he personally cried when he was told Yoichi was dead and that it was All For One who killed him. He rages internally about how Kudo stole his brother from him, and then when Bakugou blasts him into a building, he seems to lose all sense of what's happening and replaces Bakugou in his mind with Kudo, who is apparently the person he hates the most in the world. The character development for All For One and the way they've told his story is so good. For so long, he seemed like this cool, calm, collected figure who simply wanted one for all for the power. But now it seems that he's far more like Shigaraki and the League than he let on. He too is damaged and broken, and he wants the quirk so he can have his brother back with him forever, and for no other reason. It would be kind of sad and beautiful if he wasn't such a vile piece of shit. Also, I enjoy that Kudo's been dead for well over 100 years at this point, and yet All For One is still so hateful that simply being near somebody who's both strong and looks like him is enough to make him crash out like we've never seen before. Seems like this guy managed to ruin All For One's life, and he set the stage for his defeat simply by helping Yoichi all those years ago. I really hope we get to see more of that before the end, and I assume we actually will in the next episode, as the preview says that All For One's past will come back to haunt him. So I'm hyped for that. It's probably just 1 or 2 episodes left on this fight, and then it's back to the main event, so I'll enjoy it while it lasts. It's been a damn good season so far, but with all that being said, these have just been my opinions, and now I'd like to hear yours. What did you think of the episode? Did you like it? Hate it? I'm curious for your thoughts, so make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and let me know.